Hello there and welcome. Tonight let me gently guide you into the quiet corners of history, to a place where soot clings to cobblestones and the fog rolls in thick like a woolen shroud. This evening our tale unfolds in the winding alleys and soot-smudged rooftops of Victorian-era London, a city teeming with ambition, industry and shadow. But instead of kings or inventors, we will peer into kitchens and back alleys, pantries and pie shops to understand a forgotten struggle. The daily hardship of simply finding something decent to eat. In this journey, we'll walk alongside chimney sweeps and costermongers, seamstresses and factory boys. We'll sit in smoke-filled chop houses, peer into the grimy stalls of market vendors and glimpse the thin gruel of the workhouse. For while the empire boasted its greatness, the bellies of its people often told another tale. A tale of rot, deception, hunger and survival. So, make yourself cozy, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin. The year is 1847. The streets of London hum beneath a sky perpetually grey, a blend of coal smoke and the misty breath of the Thames. Carriages rattle over damp stone, their wheels slick with the grime of the city. A distant clatter of hooves fades into the murmur of market cries, and the soft, pitiful coughing of a child tucked beneath her mother's shawl. This is not the London of painted portraits or gaslight romance. This is the London of daily hunger, of bread stretched too thin, and broth made of bones long boiled dry. In a narrow lane just off Whitechapel, the air is thick with the tang of vinegar and soot. A boy named Elias, no more than 10, darts between puddles and horse dung, a tattered sack slung across his bony shoulder. His eyes, wide, grey, watchful, scan the stalls of the morning market. He's not here to buy. He has no coins in his patched coat. He's here for scraps. Vendors shout over one another, hawking yesterday's carrots and bruised apples, lumps of lard, sacks of flour stiff with damp. A man in a frayed cap slaps a rat from his stall and returns to slicing a congealed wedge of pork pie. The pie is greyish-pink, the crust flaking with a mould that he brushes off with the edge of his sleeve. Elias waits. He watches. He's learned that the best chance for a free meal comes not from kindness, but from inattention. At a stall of smoked fish, the vendor turns his back to argue with a customer. Elias darts forward and snatches a small, shriveled herring. He runs, clutching it to his chest like a treasure, not looking back. In a nearby alley behind a crumbling wall streaked with soot, Elias tears into the fish. The flesh is tough and overly salted, leaving his throat parched. But it is food. It is something. He does not know, cannot know, that the fish he just ate was likely smoked weeks ago, stored in a barrel riddled with maggots and brine too weak to preserve it. Nor does he know that the salt was cheap and often laced with gypsum powder to increase its bulk. What he knows is this: his stomach no longer aches with emptiness, at least for the moment. In the same city, just a mile to the west, in a genteel district near Bloomsbury, a dinner party begins. A different kind of meal. Candles flicker in tall brass holders. A roast is carried in, its scent rich with fat and rosemary. Claret is poured, cheeses are displayed, and the crust of a fig tart glistens with egg wash. But not all is as splendid as it seems. For the beef, though well roasted, was likely bruised from a cow driven too long through London's crowded streets, its flesh dark with the fatigue of its final journey. The milk for the custard may have come from a cow kept in a sooty back alley, fed on brewery waste and urinated upon by passers-by. The butter was probably stretched with mashed potatoes or chalk, a common deception even among reputable dairymen. Even in the homes of the well-to-do, purity was illusion. Food adulteration had become a dark art, and London its grand laboratory. Across the city, bakers bleached flour with alum, a substance that caused digestive distress and constipation. Brewers added sawdust to hops. Candy makers coloured sweets with red lead and copper arsenite. Milkmen diluted their product with water from the Thames, then added chalk to restore the whiteness. No one was safe. Not the chimney sweep in Stepney, not the banker in Kensington. All were prey to a system where food was less about nourishment and more about deception. And yet, life pressed on. In the kitchen of a lodging house in Lambeth, a woman named Mrs. Fairlow stirs a pot of stew. It bubbles with something brown and thin, dotted with root vegetables that have grown soft and sweet. She adds a splash of vinegar and a pinch of salt. It is, in truth, a miracle of flavour made from almost nothing. a heel of beef bone, a handful of onion skins, and a cabbage leaf rescued from spoilage. Her tenants, weary men from the docks, sit at the long table, bowls in hand, grateful. They do not complain. They cannot afford to. And what of the children in the workhouses, the orphans and the broken? Their meals are calculated, rationed cold, a measure of gruel, oats, water, and perhaps a sliver of lard on Sundays, a single piece of bread that must last the day, and should they steal or beg for more, punishment awaits. But still, life stirs. A woman washes her vegetables in a tin basin, inspecting each potato for rot. A man bites into a pie, chewing slowly, eyes narrowed, wondering if the meat is horse. And somewhere deep in a darkened cellar, a chemist stirs powders into jars, perfecting the exact hue of raspberry jam that contains not a single berry. Victorian London was a city of ambition and industry, but it was also a city of stomachs turned inside out by hunger and trickery. To eat was to gamble, to cook was to stretch, and to survive, that was the greatest feast of all. Let us rest here, for now, in the hum of a city that never slept and the quiet, constant search for something true in a world full of pretense. By the damp stone walls of Fleet Street, a baker lights his ovens before the sun rises. The heat fills the cramped room, smoke curling from the chimney above like the breath of a dragon. Outside, the city is still draped in early morning fog, a hush before the clamour. But already, the scent of rising bread creeps through the alleyways, drawing the curious and the hungry alike. His name is Mr. Cobb, a man whose face is hardened by flour and fire. He wears a soot-black apron and walks with a limp, earned years ago on the docks. Though he earns his keep shaping loaves and crusts, he is no stranger to shortcuts. The flour he receives from his supplier is white, too white, unnaturally pale. It clumps strangely in the sack and carries a scent faintly metallic. He knows this means it's been doctored, likely with alum or even ground bones, but says nothing. The loaves must be sold. He sprinkles the dough with a dusting of more flour, kneading it with firm, practiced hands. Then carefully he divides it into portions, some for the better homes, others for the stalls in the poorer quarters. He understands the unspoken code. The finer loaves get the clean crusts, the best slices of lard or suet, a drizzle of real butter, if luck allows. The rest is merely filler, barely bread at all. As the city awakens, the sound of bootsteps grows louder. Street sweepers pass with brooms made of birch twigs, brushing away the filth of the night. But what cannot be swept is the hunger that stirs with the dawn. In every corner of London, bellies growl. Across the Thames, in Southwark, a small girl named Maggie clutches a penny in her mittened hand. She is 7, maybe 8, though her frame is stunted by years of meagre meals. Her mother has given her the coin to fetch breakfast, whatever that may mean today. The market street is alive with noise. Vendors shout over one another, their cries forming a patchwork chorus of need and desperation. A man waves a string of sausages over his head, claiming them fresh from the butcher. A woman sells pies from a wooden tray, their crusts cracked and steaming, the contents a mystery to all but her. Maggie's nose leads her to the pie woman. The scent is warm, slightly spicy, with a hint of something sweet. She holds up her coin, and the woman nods. A hand, thick with grime and flour, exchanges the pie for the penny. Maggie walks a few paces before she dares take a bite. The crust is flaky but odd, slightly chalky as if dusted with something more than flour. The filling is dense, dark and savoury. She chews slowly. There is meat, yes, but what kind? She cannot tell. It could be beef or it could be cat. She swallows anyway. Food in London is rarely what it claims to be. Sausages may be half breadcrumbs and sawdust. Cheese is stretched with starch and tinted with copper. Even beer, that comforting drink of the common man, is often sour and laced with strychnine to give it an artificial bitterness. Yet Maggie, like so many others, eats without complaint. It is not that they are unaware. It is simply that the alternative, hunger, is worse. Further west, in a boarding school along the edges of Kensington, young boys in blue uniforms gather for breakfast. The hall is dim, the air thick with the scent of boiled porridge. A ladle slops the mixture into tin bowls, steam rising like ghosts. The porridge is grey, thin and bland. A teacher patrols the aisles, cane in hand, watching for any who might speak or spill. At the head table, a boy named Thomas wrinkles his nose. He is used to better. His father, a merchant, pays handsomely for his education. But here, there is no privilege. He dips his spoon, the porridge trembles slightly, revealing bits of oat husk and what may be insects. He closes his eyes and eats. Around him, others do the same. For many children of Victorian London, institutions offered little refuge from the culinary miseries of the street. Schools, orphanages and workhouses all served food of the same philosophy, enough to live, but never enough to thrive. Back in the heart of the city, the pub doors swing open as noon approaches. Men with soot-streaked faces pile in, eager for a pint and a pie. The ale flows, cloudy, bitter and slightly warm. A plate of tripe is passed around, white and rubbery, swimming in a thin onion sauce. One man chews with a grimace, another sighs and finishes his in 2 bites. These men work in the factories and shipyards. Their days are long and the work is backbreaking. The food must be filling, if not fine. A haunch of bread, a sliver of cheese, a mug of weak beer. It is enough to keep moving, to keep lifting, to keep living. Outside, in a cramped back lane off Soho, a group of women gather in a soup kitchen. The line stretches far and the smell of cabbage is heavy in the air. A kind-faced matron ladles soup into tin cups, one after another. Her hands tremble with age, but her eyes are steady. The soup is thin, mostly water, a few beans, perhaps a bit of marrow from a bone. But to the women, it is a comfort, a small island of warmth in an otherwise cold world. Behind the matrons, sacks of donated flour sit in the corner. They are stamped with the seal of a church in Essex. She knows they are inferior, laced with fillers. She has found bits of chalk in them before. Still, they bake the bread. In the tenement above, an old man named Mr. Hollis watches from his window, coughing into a handkerchief. He remembers a time before the sky turned black. He remembers meat with flavour, vegetables grown from real earth, not the waste plots between buildings. He closes his eyes. Below, the soup line winds on. As the day fades into twilight, London's appetite does not ease, it merely shifts. Pie men walk the streets, calling out in sing-song voices, their lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps. Their carts carry stacks of hot pies, their contents unknown, pigeon, eel, rat, perhaps nothing but onion and fat. People gather around, drawn to the warmth, coins exchange hands, steam rises, bites are taken, no questions are asked. And so the city feeds itself, barely, blindly, bravely, one lie at a time. The fog returns in the early hours, draping itself like a tattered curtain across rooftops and alleys. Lamps flicker beneath its damp veil, their glow blurred and golden. Along the banks of the Thames, the river laps quietly, thick with silt and secrets. Its surface reflects a city that never truly sleeps, only dozes fitfully between the clang of iron and the growl of stomachs. In a cramped lodging above a cobbler's shop in Clerkenwell, Mrs. Viher, Agnes Bell, prepares breakfast for her 3 children. The room is small, barely large enough for the iron stove, the table and the straw-filled mattress. The air smells of old leather from the shop below, mingled with yesterday's broth. She stirs a pot with care, hoping the oats won't burn. There is no milk, no sugar, only water and a pinch of salt. A meagre portion, but hot, and that will have to do. Her youngest, Nora, peers over the edge of the table, eyes still heavy with sleep. The bowl placed before her steams, and she picks at it slowly, waiting for it to cool. Agnes watches her children eat in silence, her own stomach hollow. She tells herself she'll eat later, but she knows there won't be enough. Down the stairs and into the street, the day begins in earnest. The costermongers shout, wheeling their barrows of wilting greens and bruised apples. Chimney sweeps, their faces already blackened, hustle toward morning jobs. In every pocket of the city, someone is looking for a crust, a corner, a spoonful. Food has become a currency of its own. It is not just sustenance, but survival, a marker of class and cunning. Those who know how to stretch a ha'penny or thicken a stew with weeds and offal are regarded not with pity, but with admiration. For in London, making something out of nothing is a kind of magic. In Covent Garden, once renowned for its fresh produce, the market is a picture of faded glory. Stalls overflow with vegetables, but a closer look reveals the truth. Wilted lettuce, carrots with soft tips, onions green with mould. A vendor peels away the outer leaves of a cabbage to reveal a salvageable core. A trick of presentation, not nutrition. Nearby, a gentleman inspects a basket of strawberries. They are bright and plump, almost suspiciously so. He pays a handsome price and walks away, none the wiser. The strawberries were painted, brushed with cochineal dye, a trick of the trade. Their sweetness is real, but their freshness is a lie. Adulteration is not a scandal, it is routine. In a dingy shop behind a curtain on Bishopsgate, a man known only as the Doctor mixes powders into sacks of sugar. He wears no white coat, no spectacles. He is not a physician, but a chemist of the darkest kind. He adds ground gypsum to flour, red lead to cayenne pepper, and alum to dough. Each addition stretches the product, increases the yield, boosts the profit. He knows some of it is poisonous. He does not care. His customers are butchers, bakers, sellers of sweets. They come with coins and leave with vials, returning weekly for more. The powders are odourless, tasteless, and deadly in large doses. But who eats enough of anything to reach that point? Not in this London. Further south, in a butcher's shop in Bermondsey, Mr. Latchford wipes his cleaver on his apron. A side of beef hangs behind him, turning slightly on its hook. It is already darkening. He pours a mixture of salt and saltpetre onto the flesh, rubbing it in to halt the rot. The smell improves. The colour returns. It will be sold by evening. A woman enters, clutching a few coins. She eyes the cuts of meat, choosing carefully. Latchford weighs her selection, adds a few bones for soup, and wraps it in newspaper. She leaves, grateful. He watches her go, then turns back to the side of beef. He knows how to trim around the worst bits to present the illusion of quality. He has no malice, only necessity. If he throws away meat, he loses money. If he sells it, someone eats. There is no perfect choice, only survival. Back across the river, in a private residence near Hyde Park, a dinner is being prepared. The kitchen bustles with activity, pots bubbling, chickens roasting, sauces simmering. A scullery maid named Elsie peels potatoes with raw fingers. She is 16 and has worked in kitchens since she was 11. She knows that what leaves this kitchen will appear divine. Salmon on silver platters, birds dressed in herbs and wine, puddings heavy with cream. But behind each dish lies a small deception. The fish arrived yesterday, its eyes already clouding, and was soaked in milk to mask the odour. The wine used for the sauce was sweetened to disguise its sourness. Even the cream for the pudding was mixed with arrowroot to make it appear thicker. Still, the guests will not notice. Their forks will clink against porcelain, their lips will praise the cook, and the illusion will remain intact. Elsie is allowed to eat once the dinner is served. What's left behind becomes her meal, the skins, the bones, the half-eaten crusts. She takes them gladly. Some nights there is even a scrap of cheese, though it often carries a fine white fuzz. She scrapes it off. On Sundays, she visits her sister in Limehouse. Together they walk the narrow lanes, past the soup kitchens and pie shops, sharing stories and dried crusts. They laugh, not because life is kind, but because laughter is free and silence is too heavy. And always the city churns, a great heaving belly of want. In drawing rooms and cellars, pantries and stalls, people eat what they can, when they can. They do not ask for purity. They do not expect honesty. They hope, instead only for one more bite that won't make them sick, one more slice that tastes vaguely of home. A loaf of bread, no matter how hollow, still carries the shape of sustenance. A bowl of soup, no matter how thin, still offers warmth. And for those who've known true hunger, such illusions are enough. The narrow back streets of Spitalfield stir with life before dawn. Gas lamps flicker weakly against the gloom, their halos swallowed by the thick London air. Rain fell in the night, leaving puddles in the grooves between cobblestones, reflecting crooked roofs and iron fences like warped glass. The city breathes in slow, heavy sighs. Coal smoke, damp wool, the faint sweetness of rotting fruit. Inside a low tenement building, 3 floors up, a widow named Edith Barnes prepares her stall for the day. Her fingers, calloused and reddened, work deftly to wrap small bundles of rhubarb, apples and turnips in cloth. She ties each with string and sets them gently into a wooden crate. Much of her produce is bruised, spotted or wilting, collected from the leftovers of wealthier stalls the night before. She's learned which grocers throw away food too soon and which will barter for broken crates and beet tops. Her hands linger over a cluster of apples. They are small and blotched, with wormholes in their skins, but they carry the scent of earth and cider. She tucks them into the centre of her basket, knowing well that appearance matters more than taste. By 6 o'clock, she is at her usual corner off Petticoat Lane, beneath a rusted awning. She calls out softly, not with the bark of the louder vendors, but with a kind of weary rhythm. "Turnips and apples. Fresh and fair, love, just a penny the pair. Few stop. The market is crowded, and colour sells more than nutrition. The oranges dyed with turmeric, the gleaming tomatoes waxed to shine, the parsley soaked in water to keep it looking fresh. These draw the eye. Edith's produce is honest, but honesty is rarely enough. 2 children pass, eyeing the apples. She smiles at them and offers a bruised one freely. They take it and run, laughing. It is a small loss, but her heart is lighter for it. Nearby, a vendor sells sweet buns from a chipped wooden cart. The scent is rich with treacle and nutmeg, though neither ingredient is truly present. The sweetness comes from a syrup made of beet sugar, boiled with lye and thickened with starch. The spice is a powder, scented but flavourless. Still, the buns sell quickly, their warmth enough to draw a line of customers. Behind him, an older man leans against a brick wall, sipping from a tin cup. He's drinking coffee, or something like it. The liquid is dark and bitter, but thinned with burnt sugar and roasted chicory root. Real coffee is rare and costly. Most of what fills the cups of Londoners is a blend of cheaper grains, crushed and browned, then passed off as the real thing. He doesn't mind. He's not drinking for pleasure. He's drinking to wake up, to fill the gap in his belly, to feel something warm go down. In a bakery not far off, a delivery boy named Harold hurries in, rain clinging to the edges of his coat. He hands a folded note to the baker's wife, who nods and begins assembling a parcel of bread rolls and suet cakes. Harold waits by the door, sniffing the air. The scent of fresh bread is comforting, familiar and almost sacred. He knows better than to ask for a slice. But as the wife finishes tying the parcel, she hands him a scrap of crust. He bites into it quickly, savouring the crunch. He doesn't taste the alum. He doesn't notice the rice flour added to stretch the dough. All he knows is that it is warm, and it crunches, and for a moment, his stomach eases. Further west, in a gentleman's club along Pall Mall, breakfast is being served to men in stiff collars and waistcoats. Eggs on silver platters, ham glazed in molasses, toast stacked high. Yet, not all is as fine as it appears. The eggs, once fresh, had turned days ago. The chef boiled them in salt water and gently rubbed the shells with oil to mask their age. The ham had been soaked in brine to stave off spoilage, then baked and coated in a glaze that disguised the dryness within. One of the men sips his tea and grimaces slightly. It is too bitter, despite the milk and sugar. The leaves used were not from India nor China, but local herbs dyed with iron oxide to mimic the proper colour. Still, he drinks. It is not deception that angers these men. It is the inconvenience of a poorly executed one. They are used to falsehoods. They simply expect them to be well performed. Down in Lambeth, on a side street beside the railway, a group of rag pickers huddle around a fire. They are warming their hands, cooking something in a small pot, scraps of offal, bits of potato, and what may be a heel of bread soaked into mush. It smells faintly of liver and garlic, with a sourness that clings to the nose. They pass around the pot, dipping tin spoons and wiping them clean with rags. One man jokes that it's better than what the Queen eats, and the others laugh. The joke is old, but still good. For those who live on the margins, food is a patchwork of opportunity. A bit of waste from the butcher, a gift from the baker's boy, a sprig of rosemary growing wild between bricks. The recipe is never the same twice, but every dish is seasoned with hope. Hope that it won't cause sickness, hope that it will last until morning, hope that somehow tomorrow might taste a little better. The city's appetite is insatiable, its stomach stretched and strained by invention and poverty alike, and still it feeds on truth and lies, on hunger and illusion. Each meal a quiet compromise between survival and surrender. Night settles gently over London, though the city does not darken. Gaslights bloom like flowers along the streets, casting golden circles that shimmer on wet cobbles. The fog thickens again, curling through alleys and under eaves, wrapping the city in a damp grey hush. The scent of coal and ash hangs heavy in the air, mingling with the iron tang of river water and the faint sweetness of distant roasting chestnuts. In a narrow alley off Shoreditch High Street, a man named Isaac Carr sets up his evening stall. He is older than most, his back slightly stooped, his beard threaded with grey. His cart is small, no more than a box on wheels, fitted with a small iron grate. Beneath it he lights a shallow fire, feeding it scraps of coal and wood, coaxing it to life with careful breaths. Upon the grate he sets his wares, potatoes. They are blackened and small, their skins pitted and scarred. But as they roast, their scent warms the air, drawing the footsteps of passers-by. He sells them for a farthing apiece, just enough for a child to afford, or a woman with no more than a coin left in her apron. The roasted potatoes crackle softly. Isaac turns them with tongs fashioned from old wire. He remembers a time long ago when his father sold the same fare in the same alley. Back then the potatoes were bigger, fuller, the soil not yet leached of its goodness. Now they are grown on overworked plots or pulled from the edges of polluted fields, but they roast just the same. A boy stops, thin as a broomstick, his cap pulled low. Isaac nods, holds out a potato wrapped in newspaper. The boy hands over a coin and scurries away, steam rising from the food in his hands. Elsewhere on the edge of the city proper, a group of factory workers finishes their shift. Their faces are smeared with soot, hands blistered from steam and iron. They move in tired silence toward a boarding house, their minds focused not on rest, but on food. The cook there, Mrs. Bledsoe, has a reputation, not for kindness nor for cleanliness, but for feeding a dozen men on the cost of feeding one. Tonight's supper is boiled beef and onions, or so the chalkboard says. In truth, it is more water than broth, more fat than meat. She has added a pinch of flour to thicken it and a spoonful of lard to make it shimmer. The onions, though, are real, slightly sweet and just beginning to turn soft at the edges. The men eat without conversation, spoons scraping tin bowls. They do not question the taste. They are grateful for the heat. One of them, a weaver named, remembers a dinner not long ago, a pie from a street vendor that tasted of sage and pepper. It had filled his stomach and made him smile. The next day, he heard two boys whispering that the vendor used dog meat in his fillings, caught in traps left in alleyways. He stopped smiling after that, but he still bought the pies. They were good, they were cheap, and hunger does not have a conscience. Across the river in Rotherhithe, a mother boils cabbage in a dented pot, the sour smell rising through the cracks of the floorboards. Her husband, a coalman, sits near the hearth, eyes closed, head bowed. The children, 3 of them, wait with bowls in hand, their knees drawn up under their chins for warmth. The cabbage has been boiled before, used yesterday for soup, and now boiled again with water and salt. A scrap of beef fat floats in the pot, more for flavour than substance. She serves them each a ladleful, tearing pieces of stale bread into the broth to soften it. They eat slowly, with soft slurps. The father opens his eyes, takes his share without a word. He knows they cannot afford meat this week nor the next. But the broth is hot, and it carries the memory of nourishment, if not the reality. Not far off, in a wine shop turned taproom, a group of younger men drink cheap gin. The drink is bitter, distilled with turpentine and flavoured with sulphuric acid to mimic the dryness of the finer spirits. They know it burns, that it numbs the tongue and leaves a fire in the belly, but it is affordable, and it dulls the sharp edge of another empty night. One of them, red-eyed and swaying, jokes about the pickled oysters served at the corner pub. "Fresh from the Thames," he says, to a round of laughter. Everyone knows the river is a sewer thick with waste and disease, but the oysters are still sold, still eaten. In Westminster, a widow of means hosts a quiet dinner for 3. The table is set with porcelain and silver, the chandelier glowing above. Her cook has prepared a beef tongue in aspic, surrounded by pressed vegetables and garnished with herbs. A jelly made of calves, feet glistens beside slices of cold roast goose. It all looks splendid, but she knows the tongue was boiled twice to remove its sourness. The aspic was set with bones bought for next to nothing from the knacker's yard. The goose, stuffed and plump, was soaked in vinegar to hide the tang of age. She eats politely, slowly, sipping wine to mask the flavours. At the foot of the table, her maid eats in the scullery, a crust, a bit of dripping, a spoon of peas. She does not mind. She is used to eating what others leave behind. Back in Spitalfields, Isaac Carr extinguishes his fire. The last of the potatoes is gone, the coins counted, the cart wheeled back into the shadows. He leaves the alley slowly, his footsteps soft. The fog swallows him, and the city sighs again, another day's hunger folded into the next. And beneath it all, a question lingers, not spoken, not written, but felt in every belly. Will tomorrow feed me kindly, or cruelly, or not at all? A light drizzle begins to fall over London, soft as ash, dappling the cobblestones and streaking the soot from window panes. The sky, ever reluctant to reveal the sun, hangs low and colourless. Chimneys smoke without pause, as though the city itself were exhaling in exhaustion. In the narrow confines of a fishmonger's shop near the docks, a woman named Millicent Foyle sharpens her knife on a stone. The rasping sound echoes in the tiled chamber, where water drips steadily from a cracked pipe above. Her apron is stained with brine and blood. Around her feet, fish scales glisten like bits of shattered glass. Millicent does not speak much. Her face is stern, lined from salt air and years of early mornings. She inspects her wares laid out on beds of slowly melting ice. Haddock, bloaters and a few eels, their bodies curled in coils. The eels, still twitching faintly, will be stewed later in a jellied broth thickened with gelatin scraped from pig bones. They are cheap, plentiful and in demand, not because they taste good, but because they last. Even when overcooked, even when cold, eel fills the belly and stays there. At midday, she ladles portions of jellied eel into bowls for dock workers who pay her by the farthing. Each man eats standing, their spoons clinking against the sides of chipped ceramic. The jelly is cold and quivers with each tremble of the hand. Some close their eyes as they eat, pretending it's something else. Most do not bother pretending. Across the river, in a shadowy corridor behind a confectioner's, a boy named Alfie sneaks inside. He is small for his age, with hands quick from necessity. The shop smells of sugar and butter, but beneath it lurks the reek of spoiled cream and fermented fruit. Alfie is not here to steal sweets. He is here for the scraps, the broken biscuits, the burnt edges of gingerbread, the crumbled toffee bits swept from the counters. The shopkeeper allows him to gather them, provided he does not speak and does not linger. The gingerbread was baked with black treacle and coloured with molasses to appear rich. The toffee, though sweet, was boiled with old butter scraped from the bottoms of barrels. But to Alfie, it is treasure. He hides a handful in his pocket and disappears into the grey beyond, munching slowly. In the back kitchen of a bustling tavern in Holborn, a cook named Roderick shouts orders over the din of clattering pans. His assistants move quickly, cutting meat and ladling gravy. The day's menu includes steak and kidney pudding, mutton broth and veal pies. None of it is quite what the name implies. The steak is more gristle than muscle, the kidneys from animals whose health was questionable. The mutton broth is thickened with barley and fat, its flavour carried more by onions than meat. The veal pies are a ruse altogether, a blend of pork and breadcrumbs, dyed pink with beetroot juice. Still, the patrons eat with enthusiasm. Ale helps, and the illusion of a hearty meal is enough for most. Roderick tastes the gravy from a ladle. It is heavy with flour and browning sauce, a concoction made from burnt sugar and salt. He nods. It will do. The food must be hot, must look rich, and must come quickly. That is all the tavern-goers ask. Back in the slums of Whitechapel, a woman named Dinah Hughes brews what she calls tea for her neighbours. In truth, it is dried hedge leaves and twigs steeped in hot water, coloured with iron filings and scented with orange peel. She serves it from a dented kettle to the women gathered in her flat, each of them wrapped in shawls, their fingers raw from laundering and sewing. They drink slowly, grateful for the illusion of civility. Someone has brought a small loaf, stale but still soft in the middle. It is broken into pieces and passed around. The crust is dry and dusted with something bitter, alum perhaps, or chalk. It does not matter. They sip, they chew, they talk softly of aches and children and the dream of summer berries in the hedgerow. Not far away, in a workhouse off Bethnal Green, dinner is being served to a line of thin, silent figures. The food is ladled without ceremony, a grey gruel, thick in places, watery in others. It contains oats and nothing more. A man at the front of the line receives his bowl and steps aside. He drinks it like broth and hands the bowl back, nodding faintly. The overseer watches them eat with a practiced detachment. His job is not to feed well, but to feed sufficiently. Just enough to avoid complaints. Just enough to keep the bodies moving. In the heart of Soho, an Italian street vendor fans the coals beneath a pan of chestnuts. The scent is warm and inviting, rising above the stench of sewage and horse droppings. He sings in a soft voice, a lullaby in his mother tongue, drawing the curious near. The chestnuts pop and split in their shells. A woman buys a paper cone full and warms her hands on it. She eats them one by one, slowly, eyes half closed. They are dry, and a few are worm-eaten, but they are warm. In this city, warmth is worth more than flavour. Later that night, under the creaking rafters of a garret room in Camden, an elderly couple share a meal of bread soaked in milk. The milk is thin, bluish, bought cheaply from a street vendor who added chalk and water to stretch his earnings. The bread is stale and spotted with green, but they tear those parts away. They chew slowly, holding hands beneath the blanket, their shoulders touching. They do not speak. Their hunger is not new, nor is their gratitude for each other's company. Beneath them, London shifts again. The carriages rumble over stone. The market stalls are covered for the night. The taverns spill laughter into the streets. And all the while, kitchens and cellars and backrooms continue their silent alchemy, turning husks into meals, lies into comfort, and hunger into a daily prayer. Morning comes reluctantly to Victorian London, hidden behind a gauze of smoke and mist. The bells of a nearby church toll softly, marking the hour without celebration. Rain has fallen again, not in torrents, but in a steady whisper that soaks into every crevice, softens every step. Streets glisten under a film of moisture, and the air tastes faintly of iron and soot. In a quiet square near Bloomsbury, a governess named Clara Finch tucks a parcel beneath her arm and steps out into the grey. Her coat is modest, the buttons dull, her shoes mended twice at the toes. She walks quickly, her eyes scanning the ground ahead. The parcel she carries is her breakfast. 2 slices of bread and a boiled egg wrapped in cloth. The egg, she knows, is slightly off. It had floated suspiciously in water when she tested it last night. But it was all she had left from the week's wages. She stops on a bench beneath a skeletal tree and unwraps the cloth. A carriage rattles past, spattering mud onto the pavement. Clara peels the shell away, carefully. The smell is faint but present, sulphur and something sour. She bites anyway, slowly, chewing with deliberation. The yolk is firm, dry, discoloured. She does not flinch. Behind her, a boy runs past, barefoot and grinning, a heel of bread clutched in one hand. His sister chases after him, shrieking with laughter. Their clothes are patched and stained, but their joy is real. A moment of mischief before the hunger returns. Clara watches them go. She wraps her eggshell in the cloth and tucks it away to discard later. Waste is not something she takes lightly. In the kitchens of a nearby almshouse, a young woman named Rosamond ladles soup into heavy iron pots. The recipe is simple: dried peas, boiled carrots, a few bones for flavour. No meat, no herbs, only the memory of nourishment. She stirs steadily, her hands red from the heat and her apron stiff with spills. The soup smells earthy and sweet, but thin. There's barely enough fat to make it glisten. She adds a pinch of salt, more out of habit than hope. A line has already formed outside the door, men in caps and coats, women with children, old widows in black. Each person will receive a ladleful, no more, no less. A man approaches, holding out a tin cup. Rosamond fills it, nods and moves to the next. The man steps aside, sips quickly, his shoulders relaxing slightly as the warmth spreads. It is not satisfaction, not pleasure, only relief. Elsewhere, in the drawing room of a merchant's house, a breakfast tray is being prepared. The cook arranges poached eggs on toast, slices of smoked fish, a dish of stewed prunes. A silver teapot gleams under the lamp. But behind the polish lies compromise. The eggs came from a coop overrun with rats. The toast was cut from bread baked 3 days ago and revived in the oven. The smoked fish is not salmon but dyed haddock, brushed with oil and salt to mimic richness. The prunes, soaked in syrup, carry a hint of fermentation. The master of the house eats in silence, reading the newspaper. His wife picks at her plate, disinterested. The illusion holds. In a cramped attic in Limehouse, a widow named Maud threads a needle through torn cloth. She is repairing a child's dress. Not for a client, but for her own daughter, who sits nearby with a bowl of oats. The oats are pale and watery, seasoned only with the smallest spoon of treacle scraped from a nearly empty jar. Maud's hands tremble slightly. Her own breakfast waits beside her, the crust of a loaf so hard it must be soaked to be eaten. She dunks it in the oat water and chews slowly. A knock at the door interrupts her. It's Mrs. Elgin, the neighbour from below, holding out a tin cup. Hans, spare a bit of tea, she asks. Maud pours a little from her kettle. It's not tea, not really. A mix of leaves swept from the bottom of a barrel, flavoured with fennel seed and a pinch of soot. but it's hot and it soothes the throat. Mrs. Elgin smiles, grateful, and retreats down the stairs. The city is stitched together by these small exchanges. A spoonful here, a crust there. Secrets shared over weak tea, kindness measured in crumbs. In the cellar of a tavern near the Strand, a butcher carves joints of meat in the half-light. His knife moves swiftly, separating gristle from fat, muscle from bone. The meat is old, but he knows how to make it look fresh. A wash of vinegar brightens the colour, a dusting of spice masks the scent. The offcuts will go into pies, the bones into broth, the fat into dripping. Nothing is wasted, nothing is questioned. Later that day, a plate of that very meat will be served to a young clerk in a borrowed coat. He'll eat slowly, chewing the meat until the taste fades. He'll pay the bill and return to his lodgings, stomach heavier than when he arrived, though not quite content. As afternoon drifts into dusk, the smell of roasting chestnuts fills the alleys. Vendors light their braziers, their faces aglow in the flickering heat. Children gather with pennies, women with shawls pulled tight. The chestnuts pop softly, their shells cracking open like tiny promises. In Clerkenwell, a family of 5 shares a loaf of bread in the fading light. It is stale, the crust chipped, the interior dry. But it is bread. They tear it into pieces, dip it in broth made from cabbage water, and eat together. The father closes his eyes as he chews. He remembers, just for a moment, a dinner long ago, a roast, golden and tender, with gravy that shimmered in the candlelight. That memory is enough to carry him through one more bite of crust. Outside, London breathes, ragged, tired, and always hungry, but within its thousands of kitchens and corners, hands move, pots simmer, mouths open in quiet thanks. The city does not feed its people well, but still it feeds them. One lie, one scrap, one quiet act of endurance at a time. In the low hum of twilight, the city takes on a softer tone. Lamps are lit in long rows, casting warm flickering pools upon the rain-dappled streets. Their glow reflects gently in puddles, dancing like ghosts across storefronts and crooked shutters. From the chimneys rises the constant curling smoke of 1,000 evening meals, or the faint attempt at them. In a narrow mews just off Paddington, the sound of boiling water echoes through the thin walls of a boarding house. Miss Eliza Bramley, a retired governess with a stiff spine and steady hands, stands over her small stove. She holds a chipped teapot in one hand and a slotted spoon in the other. Inside the pot, water simmers with a small bundle of dried dandelion leaves, a poor substitute for tea, but one that carries a certain bitterness she has grown to welcome. Beside her, a single potato bakes in a nest of ashes, the last of her food for the week. Its skin is blistered, its flesh mealy and dry, but the smell is earthy and comforting. She eats slowly when it is ready, cutting it into quarters, adding a pinch of salt saved in a folded scrap of paper. As she chews, she watches the gaslight flicker beyond the lace curtain. In the street below, a pie seller passes, crying his wares in rhythmic melodic tones. "Hot mutton pies! Hot beef and onion!" The voice grows fainter, then vanishes into the clatter of carriage wheels. But Eliza knows better. There is rarely mutton in those pies. Often not even beef. A mix of offal, suet and thickened broth, darkened with gravy browning, fills the crusts that steam so invitingly. Sometimes the meat is horse, sometimes dog, sometimes none at all. Still, they sell. In a darker quarter of Southwark, deep behind a row of warehouses, the canning factory clatters late into the evening. Inside, women work under flickering oil lamps, their fingers stained with brine and grease. They pack tins labelled ham, beef stew, ox tongue, though the reality is less certain. Meat from questionable sources is minced fine and cooked until unrecognisable, then mixed with thick gelatin and poured into tins. The lids are sealed with lead, and though the heat of the process masks the scent of decay, it cannot remove it entirely. Some tins bulge from pressure, others clink hollowly when shaken, but once labelled, once sealed, they are as good as any truth. These tins will be sold in shops across the city, and further still, to distant colonies. They are considered a marvel of modern invention, a solution to hunger. And yet in many homes they sit unopened, feared as much as they are trusted. At a public house in Bethnal Green, a group of coal haulers gather for supper. They are men of large hands and bent backs, their boots caked in mud. The landlord serves them bowls of stew, thick, brown, steaming. The stew tastes of onions, pepper and fat. The meat is soft, plentiful even, but of indeterminate origin. One man jokes that it might be last week's goat. Another claims it's better not to ask. They laugh, they drink, they eat. The warmth matters more than the answer. In a room above the pub, a young woman named Esther cradles her infant, lulling him to sleep with a soft hum. She has not eaten today. There was bread in the morning, but she gave it to her sister. Her stomach twists now and then, but she ignores it. A neighbour brings up a bowl of stew left over from the downstairs kitchen. It smells heavy, greasy. Esther accepts it, thanking her with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. She waits until the baby is asleep before eating. Each spoonful is slow, careful. She doesn't want to know what's in it. She only wants it to last. Elsewhere on Fleet Street, a printing press churns out evening papers, ink staining fingers and headlines alike. One article rails against food adulteration, another exposé on poisoned sweets and impure milk. But such stories are common now, and many pass them by. In a sweet shop a few blocks away, children press their noses to the glass, eyes wide at the display of boiled candies, sugared almonds and licorice twists. The colours gleam, red, green, yellow, blue, brighter than fruit ever dared be. Inside, the sweets are sold by the quarter pound. The dyes come from minerals, lead, copper, mercury. The candies shine like jewels, but carry danger in each bite. Still, the shop is busy. Parents bring children on Sundays as a treat. A coin buys a moment of joy, a burst of sweetness on the tongue. In the kitchens of a manor outside Kensington, servants prepare for a dinner party. The guest list includes Parliament men, bankers and their wives, a gathering of taste and influence. The menu is lavish: turtle soup, beef in aspic, pheasant with chestnut stuffing, jellies and ices in brilliant colours. But the turtle soup is made not from turtle, but from calf's head and fish, thickened with flour and seasoned until convincing. The beef in aspic is a day past prime, soaked in wine and vinegar. The pheasant was shot weeks ago and has been carefully aged, and not in the romantic sense. It smells faintly of musk. The chestnuts are mashed with breadcrumbs, and yet when served with silver forks and surrounded by candlelight, all tastes as it should. The guests smile, sip their wine and compliment the chef. And in the scullery, the staff eat the scraps, the outer trimmings, the bones picked clean, the gelatin scraped from platters. They eat in silence, seated on overturned crates, the scent of bleach and lye lingering on their skin. Above and below, rich and poor, London eats what it must. One hand holding a spoon, the other holding illusion. By the time night has deepened into its thickest hush, when even the carriages have grown sparse and the laughter from the public houses fades to a low murmur, London breathes differently. The clatter of day falls away, replaced by the distant cries of river gulls and the drip-drip of condensation from crooked gutters. Somewhere a dog howls. Somewhere else a baby fusses, its cries muffled by layers of wool and exhaustion. In a cramped dairy shop off Lamb's Conduit Street, Mr. Tobias Ellery dozes in his chair, wrapped in a coat of many stains. Around him, shelves of milk cans line the walls, tin and pewter, their surfaces dulled by years of use. A faint sourness lingers in the air, a reminder of spoiled batches past. The shop is closed for the night, but the milk remains. Earlier that day, he had added the usual: chalk for whiteness, water for volume, a dash of starch to keep it from curdling too soon. It was not cruelty, it was arithmetic. The cows on his brother's farm produced only so much, and the city wanted more. He delivered to shops, homes, and even the local hospital. Most would not notice. Those who did would say nothing. On the edge of Shoreditch, a street sweeper named Lyle returns home late, his arms aching, his shoulders hunched from the cold. His flat is barely more than a room: a stove, a cot, and a tin basin. Tonight he dines on a bowl of peas and vinegar. No salt, no butter, just boiled peas, slightly grey. The vinegar stings his nose, but it makes the dish taste of something. He eats with a spoon carved from bone, holding the bowl close to his chest. The warmth soothes him. He imagines just briefly the taste of roast beef and bread with mustard, but the image fades with the last swallow. Nearby, a grocer closes up his stall, pulling a tarp over his remaining stock. Beneath it lie carrots rubbed with oil to appear fresher, potatoes shaved to remove eyes and spots, and apples that have been dusted with coal ash to mimic the blush of ripeness. By morning, some of these will have softened too much to sell. He will boil them down, mash them with sugar and cinnamon, and sell them again as homemade preserve. Across the city, in a corner of Pimlico, a supper club gathers in a candlelit parlour. They call themselves the Thursday Gentlemen and pride themselves on fine dining. A hired French cook brings out each course with flair. Quails in jelly, lemon syllabub, spiced tongue on toast. The flavours are bright, the presentation flawless. Yet only the cook knows that the quails were past their prime and revived with strong wine, or that the syllabub had been thickened with bone glue instead of cream. The guests toast one another, raise their glasses, and proclaim it all divine. But not far beyond the candlelight, in the basement kitchen, the scullery maid sits on a low stool, scraping fat from a roasting pan. Her hands are raw, her fingernails cracked. She will have bread dipped in the pan's drippings for her dinner, the richest meal she'll eat this week. Elsewhere, in a row house near Clerkenwell Green, a Jewish family gathers around their Sabbath meal. It is humble: challah, herring, a dish of beans stewed with onions. The bread was made from flour sifted carefully to remove the chalky residue so common in market batches. The fish was cured at home, the beans grown in a small patch behind the house. The food is plain but true. The candlelight flickers on faces that are tired but content. They eat slowly, offering bites to the smallest children first. For them, the struggle for honest food is woven into faith, tradition, and a stubborn kind of dignity. In contrast, across the city in Soho, a brothel serves its patrons not only pleasure, but warm bowls of stew and glasses of dark, sweetened port. The stew is thick with mystery, bits of meat, soft vegetables, an aroma of cloves. It comforts and intoxicates in equal measure. The port, brewed in the cellar, is fortified with molasses and burnt sugar, giving it a heaviness that coats the tongue. It has never seen a vineyard, but none who drink it seem to mind. A young woman named Violet eats between customers. She wipes her mouth delicately with a lace-edged napkin, an affectation borrowed from a former client. She closes her eyes as she chews, letting the warmth seep into her, pretending, if only for a minute, that this place is a home and the food is a gift. And in an almshouse in Wapping, elderly residents gather for their nightly porridge, oats and water, served in wooden bowls worn smooth by decades of use. The meal is quiet, solemn. Each person eats with care, swallowing without haste, their bodies grateful even for this. The porridge is thin tonight, supplies are low. There is talk of cutting rations again. One old man, Mr. Hatley, folds his hands after eating, murmurs a prayer not of thanks but of endurance. He remembers better meals, when beef was truly beef, when eggs were golden and firm, when milk did not separate in the cup. But those days feel distant, like a dream half remembered. The city outside sleeps in fragments, some in silks, others in soot. All dreaming, perhaps, of food that nourishes, of kitchens where truth simmers gently on the stove. But for now, London eats what it can and dreams on. Dawn breaks without ceremony, its pale light slipping through the grime-streaked windows of tenements and townhouses alike. The sky, ever reluctant, shifts from coal grey to a tired blue. London begins to stir once more, its heartbeat measured in footsteps, in cartwheels, in the distant cry of vendors summoning the day. In a butcher's stall in Haggerston, Mr. Francis Polden arrives before the sun is fully risen. His apron is stiff with dried blood, and the cold has stiffened his fingers into claws. He works them open by striking them against the side of the chopping block. The smell of meat, raw, metallic, tinged with vinegar, hangs heavy in the still air. Before him hangs a row of carcasses, or what's left of them, stripped ribs, glistening flanks, the occasional haunch with the price chalked onto the bone. Much of the meat is aging past what might be called safe. The solution, as always, is brine, vinegar and salt, sometimes a touch of soda ash to reduce the smell, sometimes a wash of ox blood to restore colour. He sharpens his cleaver and begins to cut. Outside, the first customer arrives, a laundress with coins wrapped in cloth. She buys a bundle of bones, mostly marrowless, and a string of sausages that have sat for 2 days in a wooden tray. They are pink, too pink, from dye and saltpetre. She does not ask their contents. She walks home quickly, her basket swaying with the weight of her purchase. In her kitchen, she will boil the bones into broth, fry the sausages, and stretch them with onions and breadcrumbs. Her children will eat with open mouths, none the wiser. Across the river in Newington, a grocer named Mr. Appleton opens his doors to a line of early risers. His shelves are crowded with tins and jars, with flour sacks and glass bottles filled with syrup the colour of honey. But little is what it seems. The syrup is mostly glucose, flavoured with caramel and thickened with gelatin. The flour contains powdered chalk, whitening it unnaturally. The jams are red with cochineal, their fruit content minimal, sometimes none at all. He knows the origin of every deception. He even orchestrates some of them himself. Still, he smiles as he sells. One customer, a quiet boy with a patch over one eye, buys a half loaf and a small tin of meat paste. He doesn't speak. The grocer watches him leave, the tin tucked under one arm. It is labelled Devon pork, though it contains mostly beef fat and offal. Further east, along the canals of Limehouse, boats rock gently in the murky water. A woman named Polly Jenkins prepares a breakfast of fish cakes for dock workers who gather outside her cart. She has blended mashed potatoes with fish scraps, heads, tails, and fins, all passed through a hand grinder until unrecognisable. The cakes are fried in drippings saved from pub kitchens. She flips them carefully, her sleeves rolled up, her eyes watching the flames. They sizzle and brown, their edges crisp. To the men, they are a bargain. Filling, warm, just enough. One man bites into his and pauses. A sliver of bone pricks his tongue. He pulls it free, tosses it aside, and keeps eating. Elsewhere, in a boarding school on the edge of Hampstead, young girls gather for their morning meal. Their dresses are clean but plain, their braids pulled tight. They sit at long wooden tables, each with a cup and a bowl. The porridge served to them is pale, nearly colourless, with a crust forming where it cooled too long in the pot. It has been made with water and a small measure of oats, just enough to meet the allowance. The milk, once added, has already begun to separate. The teacher watches them closely as they eat, ensuring no food is wasted. One girl, pale and thin, eats slowly, scraping the last from her bowl. She dreams of toast with butter, of boiled eggs, of warm milk that does not taste faintly of lime. In a more affluent home not far away, a governess pours warm milk for her young charge. The milk is smooth, ladled from a jug, wrapped in cloth. The child refuses to drink it, pushing the cup aside with a frown. His mother enters, perfumed and dressed, and orders the governess to fetch new milk from the market. She does not trust the dairyman who delivers to their door. She suspects the milk is being watered down. She is right. Back in the city's heart, along the bustling avenues of Holborn, a cafe opens its doors. Its windows glow invitingly, and the scent of fresh pastry wafts into the street. Inside, gentlemen read newspapers and sip coffee from porcelain cups. But the coffee is not all bean. Roasted dandelion, chicory and acorns have been ground into the blend to reduce cost. The cream has been whipped with borax to make it thicker. Still, the patrons drink deeply, some adding sugar cubes tinged with bone ash to give them their brightness. One man lights a cigarette and remarks to his companion that the coffee is stronger than usual. The other nods. They order toast with butter, unaware that the butter contains mashed turnips and yellow dye. And in the back alley behind the cafe, the dish boy eats crusts discarded from silver trays. He hides behind the ash bin, gnawing quietly, hoping not to be seen. The crusts are dry, but still carry the scent of jam and meat fat. In every corner of London, food is found, sold, cooked and consumed, by choice, by need, by hope. It wears many faces, bears many names. Some know its truths and turn away, others never ask, but all are fed, or at least they try to be. The rain returns in the early afternoon, soft and persistent, tracing silvery rivulets down window panes and gathering in the hollows of cobbled streets. Umbrellas bloom like ink blots among the crowd, and the click-clack of boot heels becomes a softer, squelching rhythm. The scent of wet stone rises from the ground, mingled with smoke and the sharper tang of fresh manure recently spilled from a passing dray. In an open-air market along Leather Lane, traders shout over the downpour, tarpaulins flapping above their stalls. Beneath one, a woman named Hester Knowles arranges her baskets of pickles and preserves with practiced precision. The jars gleam in the grey light, their contents bright and inviting: cucumbers, onions, red cabbage, gooseberries. But the vinegar is cheap and harsh, often soured with copper coins to intensify the colour. The sugar has been stretched with powdered gypsum. She does not offer tastings. Her customers, many of them housewives and maids, choose quickly. One buys a jar of raspberry jam for her employer. It contains no raspberries at all, only apple pulp and beet juice thickened with starch. Still, it spreads sweetly on bread, and that is enough. Hester watches the coins change hands, her fingers damp from the rain and the brine. She remembers when her mother made pickles the old way, with patience and spice. But time does not wait for honesty, nor does poverty. Farther east, in a tannery by the river, labourers break for their midday meal. The air is thick with the stench of lime, urine and soaked hides. They sit on overturned barrels, wiping their hands on their aprons before unwrapping parcels of bread and meat. One man pulls apart a thick sandwich, white bread, dark meat and a smear of mustard. The meat smells sharp, but he bites in with hunger. It's salted pork, or so the vendor claimed. In truth, it's more likely old mutton, soaked in brine and boiled until the bones slipped free. The mustard masks what salt cannot. Across the way, a boy eats cold boiled potatoes with his fingers. They were given to him by a porter who could not finish his lunch. He dips them in salt from a wax paper twist, humming as he chews. It is the most he's eaten in 2 days. In Marylebone, a luncheon is laid for the ladies of the Temperance Society. The table is dressed in crisp linens, and the air smells of lavender and warm bread. The spread includes mushroom pie, creamed carrots, boiled eggs, and apple tarts. The women speak softly, their voices carrying through the tall windows to the street below. But the mushrooms were gathered hastily, some from fields too close to the city's edge. A few carry a bitterness that is not entirely natural. The cream in the carrots is thinned with arrowroot, and the apples in the tart have been sweetened with treacle to mask their mealy texture. Still, the guests praise the meal. Simple, but wholesome, says one. So refreshing, says another. The cook, listening from behind the kitchen door, nods with relief. In a small house on the outskirts of Clerkenwell, an Irish family sits down to stew. The mother, Naam, stirs a pot that has barely changed in days. Carrots, turnips, and a single bone simmer with barley. Each evening, she adds water and whatever scraps she can find, a handful of greens from the market floor, a rind of cheese, a scoop of dripping saved from a neighbour. The children eat slowly, their spoons scraping at the bottom of their bowls. The youngest, a boy of 4, asks for more. She gives him her portion without pause. Hunger has become a quiet guest in their home, always present, rarely spoken of. Nearby, in a private kitchen behind a pastry shop, a woman named Livia dusts confections with powdered sugar. The sweets are exquisite: petit fours, almond crescents, candied orange peel. But the sugar is not pure. It has been cut with chalk and starch, and sometimes with a bitter-tasting mineral powder meant to whiten it further. She sighs as she works. Her employer will not change suppliers. It's cheaper this way, and customers never complain. Later, in the front of the shop, a gentleman will buy a box of those very sweets for his daughter's birthday. The girl will bite into one with delight, her fingers dusted in white. The taste will be pleasing, though unfamiliar. And in a lodging house in Wapping, 5 men crowd around a table for a communal supper. One has brought a pie, another a bottle of porter, and the rest contribute crusts, scraps, a wedge of dubious cheese. The pie, as always, is a mystery. Heavy, rich-smelling, and suspiciously uniform. Someone jokes that it's made from alley cat. No one laughs too hard. It might be true. They eat it anyway, tearing pieces with their fingers, dipping into the porter, grateful for the company, if not the cuisine. In every district, from Chelsea to Canning Town, the story is the same. Meals are cobbled together from fragments and flourishes. Labels promise more than they deliver. Recipes disguise more than they reveal. And through it all, Londoners eat, slowly, cautiously, sometimes joyfully, but always with the silent understanding that what's on the plate is never quite what it seems. The illusion of nourishment is the one thing no one can afford to do without. As the evening shadows lengthen and the gaslights flicker to life, the city once more dons its nightly disguise. Golden halos through the fog, soft silhouettes behind draped windows, the clatter of footsteps muted by wet stone. Smoke spills from chimney pots, curling into the dusk like the tired breath of an old man. In every direction, the scent of dinner seeps into the air, of roasting, stewing, frying, but always laced with something just slightly off, just slightly wrong. In a modest townhouse in Islington, a young married couple prepares their supper together. Thomas and Margaret Fairburn, newlyweds with little more than hope and a rented parlour, move quietly about their kitchen. The table is set with care, mismatched plates, a single candle stub in a brass holder. Their meal tonight is to be liver and onions, purchased earlier that day from a butcher who offered them a deal too good to refuse. Thomas unwraps the parcel, frowning slightly. The liver has an odd sheen, almost blue at the edges. Margaret says nothing as she slices it thinly. She has soaked it in milk all afternoon, hoping to ease the bitterness. The onions are already sizzling in a bit of dripping, saved from a tin the week before. The meal, once plated, looks inviting in the low candlelight. They eat slowly, quietly. The liver is chewy and carries a faint metallic aftertaste, but the onions are sweet and the warmth fills the room. They speak of plans, of better days, not of what the butcher might have truly sold them. Far across the city in Bow, a widow named Betsy Cray boils a pot of greens. Her fire is weak, the coals nearly spent, and the cabbage simmers slowly in a thin broth made from boiled carrot tops and a scrap of ham bone reused for the third time. She hums an old tune as she stirs, her fingers stiff from the cold. There is no meat left on the bone, but it imparts just enough flavour to make the broth taste like something more than water. She eats from a wooden bowl, slowly. The greens are soft, overcooked, their colour drained into the water. Still, they are nourishing, or at least they feel like they might be. In Kensington, at the table of a prosperous family, the housekeeper oversees the evening spread. Roast goose is served, its skin golden and crackling, surrounded by root vegetables and accompanied by a dark, rich gravy. The family murmurs their appreciation as they eat, but behind the scenes the cook had wrestled with the meat's age. The goose, delivered 2 days late, had begun to turn. It was bathed in vinegar, seasoned heavily with pepper and cloves, and cooked slowly to disguise the odour. The gravy was thickened not with flour but with brown starch and a spoonful of meat glaze made from gelatin and dye. The family does not notice. They sip wine, speak of Parliament, and compliment the table's presentation. They will not know what they ate, nor how close it came to being discarded. Down in the scullery, the staff eat goose skin and root ends, sopped in leftover gravy. It is the best meal they've had in days. In the cluttered interior of a chop house on Fleet Street, clerks and apprentices crowd the benches shouting for steak and ale, for pies and puddings. The air is thick with smoke and the scent of browning meat, though the meat itself is questionable. The steak is thin, tough and streaked with fat. The ale tastes metallic, likely drawn from a reused cask and thickened with burnt sugar to restore its colour. But the patrons eat heartily, dunking bread into puddings that tremble with too much suet and too little fruit. A pair of young men argue over politics while wiping gravy from their chins. They know the fare is poor, but it fills the belly, and the noise, the warmth, the illusion of abundance. It is enough to make the food seem better than it is. In a narrow alley in Whitechapel, a family of street vendors huddle around their evening pot. They have sold roasted chestnuts all day and now cook the unsold ones into a kind of porridge with water and salt. The texture is mealy, the flavour bland, but the children eat eagerly, their hands cupped around tin bowls. Their father, Arthur, stares into the flames. He remembers a time before the factory closed when he brought home meat on Fridays and suet pudding on Sundays. Now he counts every coin. The chestnuts bought in bulk from a supplier who likely dyed the bad ones to hide the rot are all they have. His wife adds a spoon of sugar saved from the week before. It clumps strangely, too white, too fine, likely stretched with plaster dust. But the children smile. It is sweet. It is warm. It is good. On the banks of the Thames, a solitary man, known only as Finch, eats his dinner beneath a bridge. His coat is torn, his boots split at the seams. He has a small fire in a metal can and over it roasts a piece of something, meat of unknown origin, found perhaps or traded. It hisses as it cooks and he turns it with a stick. Beside him sits a tin of beans, cold, unseasoned. The label has long since peeled away. He eats the beans first, then chews the meat carefully, slowly. It is tough and stringy. It might be rat, he does not care. Above, the city pulses on, warm dining rooms, crowded inns, silent garrets where soup boils quietly in borrowed pots. Food is everywhere and nowhere. It promises comfort, yet often brings unease. It fills the stomach, but rarely the spirit. And in the hush of evening, with the rain pattering against rooftops and the glow of 1,000 lanterns trembling in the dark, London does what it always has. It eats, it waits, and it dreams of meals worth remembering. In the deep velvet of night, long after the last market stall has been folded shut and the final pie cart wheeled home through the muck, the streets of London grow still. The rain has ceased, leaving the air damp and clean for once, and the only sounds are the occasional shuffle of a lamplighter's boots and the creak of a pub sign swaying gently in the breeze. Behind closed shutters, thousands of bellies settle, some full, some empty, most somewhere in between. In a bakery on the south side of the Thames, a boy named Tobias is already at work. He is 14, though the lines on his face make him seem older. By the glow of a single lamp, he measures flour from a coarse sack into a basin, coughing softly as the dust rises into the chill air. The flour is pale and dry, but he knows better than to trust its colour. His master, the baker, purchases it cheaply from a man who adds ground alum and bone dust to stretch it. The alum gives the bread a fine white crumb, but Tobias has seen what it does to the stomach. The cramps, the quiet agony endured by customers too poor to choose better. Still, the dough must be kneaded, the loaves shaped. He works with steady hands, dipping his fingers in lard to prevent the mix from sticking. Once, years ago, he tasted real bread, rich with butter, crusted deep gold. He thinks of it now only in moments like this, when the fog hangs so low it feels like memory. Across the city, in a rented room near King's Cross, an old man named Silas warms a cup of broth over a candle flame. The broth is thin, nearly translucent, with 2 pieces of carrot and a single sliver of meat floating in it, like ghosts. He had bought it for a penny from a vendor who called it beef consommé. Silas drinks it slowly, savouring the heat as much as the flavour. He has no teeth left, and the soft warmth suits him. In his youth, he had worked in the markets, hauling sacks of potatoes and wheels of cheese for grocers who no longer exist. Now he lives on charity and small remembrances, bowls of soup, heels of bread, and memories of when food was real and hunger not so constant. In a factory dormitory off Commercial Road, the night shift prepares for rest. The women peel off damp stockings and lay their shawls over railings to dry. Dinner was taken hours ago, a stew provided by the owner, made from boiled barley and what might once have been pork. Its taste had been masked by vinegar and cloves, a cheap trick to hide the sourness of age. One girl, no older than 17, lies curled on her cot, rubbing her stomach. She had taken a second bowl, greedy with hunger, and now pays for it in cramps. Still, she does not regret it. The warmth was worth the ache. In an opulent home in Mayfair, a kitchen maid finishes polishing the silver from dinner service. The household had entertained guests that evening. 3 courses, port, a table strewn with flowers and laughter. The maid had observed from the shadows, her eyes following the plates as they moved in and out of the room. She had snuck a spoonful of pudding in the scullery, her fingers trembling. It was sweet and cool, flavoured with almonds and rosewater. She didn't know the almonds were bitter kernels ground with sugar and starch, nor that the cream was thickened with animal glue. She only knew it tasted like nothing else in her world. In the narrow hallways of a Soho boarding house, a painter named Reuben sketches by lamplight, his supper untouched beside him. It's a dish of peas and mashed potato, bought for a farthing from a nearby cafe. He picks at it absently, his pencil dancing in the margins of a brown paper bag. The peas are grey, lightly tinned, the potatoes lumpy and cold. He is not hungry. Not tonight. He has sold a small watercolour for £1 and spent half of it on new brushes. The food can wait. Art in its own way fills him more. Back in Whitechapel, under a sagging awning behind a butcher's, a woman named Elsie retrieves discarded bones from a crate. She moves quickly, her scarf pulled low, her skirt pinned up. The butcher turns a blind eye. He knows she'll boil them for broth, maybe roast them with onions if she finds any. Elsie's children sleep in a single cot in the next room of their lodging. She sets the bones in a pot and adds water. There is no salt, no herbs, but the scent begins to rise, faint but promising. She hums as it heats, dreaming of thicker stews, of fat meats and steamy pies. She knows the dream won't last past morning. In the cellar of a school in Greenwich, the night janitor drinks from a bottle of port. It is sweet and syrupy, not from grapes but from molasses, mixed with alcohol and bittering agents. He drinks slowly, listening to the creaks above as the building settles. His supper was bread with dripping, thick and salty, scraped from a tin kept under his cot. He dreams of Ireland, where meals were once potatoes and milk, where cheese was real and apples tasted of autumn. But that was before the hunger drove him across the sea, before London swallowed his name. All across the city, beds are turned down, candles snuffed, fires coaxed into embers. Some rest with full bellies, others with gnawing hunger. Most lie somewhere in between, lulled into uneasy sleep by habit and fatigue. And in every quiet corner, every crooked alley and crumbling tenement, the city waits for morning, for the next loaf, the next bowl, the next mouthful of hope disguised as food. The first breath of morning unfurls over the rooftops of London like steam from a kettle. It is a thin, pale hour, barely light, yet already the clatter of daily labour has begun to echo down narrow streets and stone-paved lanes. Smoke rises from chimneys once more, curling lazily into a sky not quite sure of the day's weather. In the damp quiet, the city begins its ritual again, the seeking of sustenance, the alchemy of hunger and invention. In the deep yard behind a row of shops in Clerkenwell, a young woman named Ginny Adderley tends a pot balanced precariously over a fire. She is stirring porridge, coarse oats water and a spoonful of lard for body. It bubbles gently, letting off the faintest aroma of salt and smoke. Around her, a gaggle of laundresses gather, each waiting for a turn with the tin ladle and shared basin. They eat standing, wrapped in shawls, hands pink from lye soap and cold. The porridge is gritty and thin, but it clings to the ribs. A few of them pass around a jar of treacle, dipping the edge of a spoon into its sticky depths and stirring it into their bowls to sweeten the illusion. Ginny smiles when it's her turn. She saved a pinch of nutmeg in her apron pocket and sprinkles it into her portion. For a moment, she imagines she's eating in her mother's cottage, miles and years away. Elsewhere, in a bakery along the Mile End Road, a hush settles over the shop as loaves are set onto racks. They are uniform, neatly scored, crusts dusted with flour that carries just the faintest shimmer, powdered alum, mixed by the sackful into the dough. It makes the bread look rich, full and white, though it binds the stomach like mortar. Mr. Hemmings, the baker, does not look up from his ledger as his assistant slides each loaf into the display. The customers will be waiting soon, clerks, housemaids, even a curate from the chapel nearby. They won't ask what's in the bread. They never do. Most of them know. Most of them, like Mr. Hemmings, believe it better not to speak. A short walk away, in a pub still shuttered from the night before, the landlord's wife picks through yesterday's leftovers. A few sausages, blackened but edible, sit in a cold pan. She cuts them into slices and lays them out with a hunk of cheese that's begun to bloom white at the edges. She scrapes the mould away carefully. The bread is hard, but when toasted it will do. By the time the front door is opened to passing tradesmen and coach drivers, the smell of frying fat fills the tap room. Plates clatter, mugs are polished, and the first orders of the day are taken. Thick slices of toast with dripping, eggs boiled hard and served with salt, pickled onions sharp enough to sting the eyes. The patrons eat quickly, wiping their mouths with coat sleeves, too tired to taste. Across the city, in a quiet mews behind Belgravia's polished facades, the servants' quarters come to life. The cook, Mrs. Blatchley, prepares breakfast for the household above. Eggs from the market, already nearing their end, are cracked carefully, their whites cloudy. Bacon is sliced thin to hide the green tinges near the rind. The coffee is chicory-rooted and darkened with a little soot-black molasses. She sets the tray with a practised hand. In the drawing room, the mistress of the house will sip her brew and wrinkle her nose, calling for more sugar. She will eat her toast, buttered with a mixture of cream and mashed potatoes, and comment that the kitchen is running short again. Back downstairs, the footman and chambermaid share what's left. The egg scraps, the cracked toast, a bit of cheese. They do not complain. They've tasted worse, and this is not the day for hunger. Meanwhile, in a classroom in Lambeth, children sit two to a bench, heads bowed over slates and chalk. The schoolmaster drones his lesson while the assistant hands out their daily ration, a cup of gruel, a scrap of bread, and once a week a penny sweet if the lesson is learned. The gruel is laced with barley and sometimes thickened with boiled wheat husks. The bread has been stretched with sawdust flour, bought from a dishonest miller who claims it's oat. One child, a girl with copper hair and a tear in her frock, eats with slow reverence. Her father died last spring in a rope-making factory, and her mother works the docks, sorting fish. Food is not a certainty in their home. She saves half her bread in her pocket for her brother, who waits in their attic room with fever and a hollow cough. In the markets of Spitalfields, the stalls groan with colour, but none of it is quite right. Carrots rubbed with red ochre, oranges dipped in dye to brighten their dull peels, herbs sprayed with vinegar to revive the droop of wilt. Even the butter, on offer from a heavy-jowled man with a cheerful voice, has been worked with chalk and mashed with suet to stretch the weight. But there are buyers. There are always buyers. A widow selects apples that glisten unnaturally. A cook from a boarding house haggles over onions. A factory boy with a face like ash steals a dried herring when the fishmonger isn't looking. It's gone in a blink, and no one chases him. Hunger makes poets of the quick, saints of the quiet, and ghosts of the desperate. And beneath it all, beneath the black bread and dyed cheese, the boiling pots of bones and nettles, the pies filled with meat of unnamed origin, London breathes its ragged, resilient breath. The city feeds itself on illusion, on grit, on need. And every mouthful, every crumb is a promise made between hunger and survival. Eat and live and do not ask too much. The final hours of the day stretch long across London, casting the city in tones of brass and smoke. Shadows climb the brick walls of workshops and chapels. The river reflects the last scraps of sunlight like molten lead, its surface broken only by the passage of barges and the occasional drift of rubbish. Chimney stacks exhale steadily into the amber dusk, and the city's great hunger begins again, slower now but deeper, as though it has settled into the bones. In a squalid back court of Bermondsey, a mother named Ada Lowry kneels beside a low fire, stirring a pot of nettle broth. The nettles were gathered from the edge of a cemetery wall, their sting tamed by a long boil. She has added a few marrowless bones saved from meals past, and the last of a shriveled onion. The broth is greenish, thin, with no meat to speak of. Her two children sit near the hearth, eyes fixed on the pot, knees drawn to their chests. Ada speaks softly to them as she stirs. She tells them stories of when she was a girl, when her father raised rabbits in their yard, and stew was thick with meat and thyme. She doesn't mention the evictions, the factory closures, the neighbours turned lodgers in their own rooms. She lets the steam carry those worries elsewhere. In the parlour of a boarding house in Pimlico, 6 men gather around a single loaf and a dish of potted meat. The loaf is stale, its crust brittle, but they dunk it in hot water from the kettle and smear it with the spread, a gritty paste of suet, salt and spices. The label had promised beef. One man jokes that it might just as easily be boot leather. Still they eat, slowly, methodically. Some have just come from the rail yards, others from the docks. Their clothes smell of tar and oil, their hands black beneath their fingernails. One man takes out a tin of sardines, opens it carefully and offers a portion to the others. The oil is sharp and old, but it glistens, a richness they rarely see. Farther north in a townhouse in Bloomsbury, a widow dines alone. Her servant has set the table neatly, white linen, silver fork, a small vase of dried lavender. Her supper is soup, turtle, the cook calls it, but no turtle has touched the pot. It is made of veal and herbs, thickened with gelatin and greened with spinach juice. It smells faintly of salt and Madeira wine. She eats with slow precision, dabbing her lips between sips, her eyes unfocused. She was raised in Yorkshire on beef and barley, fresh cream and eggs taken warm from the nest. Her London years have taught her how to read between the lines of a menu, how to recognise the poetry of substitution. In a pastry shop behind Covent Garden, the last pies of the day cool in the window. Mutton and potato, apple and raisin, onion and suet. Their crusts are glossy with egg wash, their scent inviting. Yet the apples are turnips sweetened with sugar, the mutton a blend of organ meats and old fat, and the suet cut with flour to stretch it thinner. A man in a cloth cap presses a coin to the glass and points. The baker's boy hands over a warm pie, and the man walks off into the twilight, taking bites between long strides. The taste is good enough. He'll not ask for more. In a soup kitchen near Clerkenwell Green, candles flicker in sconces as bowls are passed down the line. Volunteers serve quietly, their aprons stiff with flour and broth. The soup tonight is a barley and leek blend with scraps of salted pork floating here and there. The pork has been sliced paper thin to reach more bowls. At one table, an old soldier eats with trembling hands. Across from him, a girl of maybe 12 eats with both hands, hunched over her bowl. No one speaks. But the quiet is not sad. It is the hush of warmth of food taken in the company of others, of stomachs filled, if only for the night. On a barge moored near Limehouse, a boatman and his wife dine beneath a canvas awning. They have fried sprats and mashed peas, served on tin plates. The fish were bought cheap, nearly turned, but fried quickly in boiling lard until the bones could be crunched and swallowed whole. The peas are a blend of dried and fresh, mashed with margarine made of beef tallow and yellow dye. They eat facing the water, the city behind them a haze of light and chimney smoke. The woman hums quietly, and the man nods in rhythm. A second helping of fish is offered and refused, not out of politeness, but out of caution. There must be enough for breakfast. In a garret above a printer's shop, a young couple shares an apple, split with a paring knife dulled by years. It is their dessert, the only sweet they can afford. The apple is floury, its skin bruised, but it is fruit. Real fruit. A rarity. They eat the halves in silence, seated on crates, the floor beneath them bare. When finished, they lick the juice from their fingers and the woman tucks the seeds into a paper scrap. Perhaps they will plant them. Perhaps nothing will come. Below in the printer's shop, a man leans over a final run of pamphlets. The ink is fresh, the type still warm. The title reads, The Great Fraud, What Londoners Truly Eat. It will be read by many, dismissed by most. For in the end, everyone knows. They know that the milk is watered, the flour stretched, the meats of unknown origin. They know that vinegar masks rot, that sweetness hides the lack of fruit, that colour is a lie told by powders and minerals. And yet they eat. Because they must. Because hunger bends the truth until it serves. And so, as the city folds itself into sleep once more, it does so with bellies half full and hopes just barely intact. In the silence that settles over rooftops and hearths, London dreams not of feasts but of enough, always enough, no more, no less.